Hello, welcome back. And yeah, Zoe, you look ready. Yeah,
Yes,
you're fine to go? Yes?
yes, yes,
So
yes.
I am delighted to welcome for the third paper of this morning Zoe Marzolo, who is an MA candidate. And she is going to be presenting a paper, Pesnoljubie, the Melomania in Russia at the end of the 18th century. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing your ideas.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. So today I will talk about Pesnoljubie, a Russian comic opera written at the end of the 18th century that I think is very important and significant in the process of emancipation of the Russian musical theater from the French and Italian tradition. And I will analyze this comic opera and I will try to show how through the introduction of a typical Russian elements, this opera witnesses the autonomy and the originality of the Russian musical theater, even when it's not possible to talk about a full-fledged Russian theater. So Russian musical theater has developed since the second half of 18th century thanks to the influence of Italian and French theater, but it achieved its autonomy only at the beginning of the 19th century with the Venetian artist Caterino Cavos. In order to understand why Russian musical theater is so dependent on Western sample, but at the same time so distinctive and rich of its own original elements, it is important to consider the process of emancipation from French and Italian tradition, which led to the birth of the Russian national theater. On this matter, Russian comic opera Pesnoljubie is exemplary, but no specific and scientific studies have been carried out on it until the research I did, matching my interest for the opera and the Russian language, which was the subject of my bachelor degree thesis in 2019. So, Pesnoljubie, written by Alexander Vasilievich Khrapovitsky for the music of Vicente Martini Soler, was represented for the first time on the 7th of January 1790 at St. Petersburg Court on the occasion of the reopening of the theaters after the winter closure. This opera is important especially for the main theme which the storyline is built on, the melomania, a visceral and almost morbid passion for music. The melomania is a widely spread attitude in the 18th century's Italian and French high society, but it is also a foreigner's tendency towards Italian music and musicians. That is the reason why it was often the subject which a lot of comic intrigues were based on. Unsurprisingly, I ran my research comparing the Russian Pesnoljubie to two French plays on the same theme, written and represented in the second half of the 18th century. La Musicomanie, a comedy in prose by Nicolas Médard-Odineau and Jean-François Arnaud, and La Melomanie, a comic opera by Stanislas Champagne on the libretto by Grenier. In comparing these three plays, I observed that most of the principal traits of the French plot are shared by Pesnoljubie, but a lot of unique aspects make this opera typically Russian. Therefore, through my analysis, I try to show evidence of how, despite Russian theater lacks a strong operatic heritage and is forced to avail itself of shapes, patterns, and elements of European tradition, it has the ability to create something completely original before it is possible to even talk about a full-fledged Russian theater. From a structural point of view, the three plays are built in different ways. The French one are made up of one act, while Pesnoljubie is made up of three acts like the traditional comedy in prose. As for the length, they seem to be similar, relying on the text, but La Melomanie is a little longer due to the musical accompaniment. However, the Russian comic opera is more flowing and interesting thanks to the variations in the storyline, which are part of the process of Russification I mentioned earlier. The story which all the three plays are based on revolves around a typical comic subject, a happy marriage hampered by some characters and events, which unfolds in the dwelling of a melomaniac baron who wants one of his daughters to marry a renowned Italian musician. Va Carmini in La Musicomanie, Fugantini in La Melomanie, and Tenori in Pesnoljubie. He furthermore wants everyone around him, including servants, to know music, to sing, or to play at least one instrument. Especially in the French plays, there are a lot of comic scenes in which the Baron reproaches his valets for not being capable to accomplish any task related to music because of their poor musical skills. Unfortunately, his daughter is in love with a young man who completely ignores music stuff. The happy ending, sanctioned by wedding celebration, is reached through the help of the Baron's favorite servant, who comes up with a plan whereby the young lover manages to pretend to be an Italian musician and thus marry the girl. As we will see later, the ending in Pesnoljubie is slightly different, thanks to the introduction of some new elements. The first thing to be Russified is the title. In the French examples, La Musicomanie and La Melomanie, the title is marked by the suffix mania, which gives a negative meaning to the Baron's passion for music, orienting our perception to a pathological state, an obsession very far from the concept of love. On the other hand, in Pesnoljubie, the term mania disappears and is replaced by love. In this way, the whole play gets a very different meaning, conforming itself to the complex feeling by which Pesnoljubie and the nobleman melodist are inspired. The term Pesnoljubie etymologically stems from pieśń, the singing, and ljubit, to love. Actually, in Russian, it exists the equivalent of melomaniac and melomania, which is meloman in Melomania, but the author intentionally chose Pesnoljubie, giving the message that the opera is about love for the music and not about obsession. This is the feature that distinguishes melodies from the main characters of the French plays. The setting is itself Russified. In French plays, the action takes place in the modern and crowding environment of the capital city, Paris. Quite the opposite in Pesnoljubie, in which melodist conducts a choir of gardeners in his own usadba, a typical Russian noble estate located in the suburbs. The usadba is an economically autonomous complex of buildings, including the main house, some residential houses for the servants and the peasants with the outbuildings, adjacent lands such as the garden, and sometimes even a little church built within the estate's territory. The latter makes the usadba also the center of spiritual life, often frequented by the inhabitants of neighboring villages. This kind of territorial organization does not exist in the Western culture, and it is from this very peculiar environment that ensue all the new elements. The author could have chosen to set the opera in the center of a big city, such as Moscow or St. Petersburg, to stay consistent with the models. However, placing his character in the usadba, he manages to develop the stereotype of the Russian melomaniac and conveys the irony of a country nobleman whose musical madness leads him till the creation of his own choir made up of servants and gardeners. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to give the story this typical Russian nuance. The plot of Pesnoljubie is thereby structured as follows. Melodist, a musicophile rather than a melomaniac country nobleman, forces his choir of servants, led by the valets Primo and Secondo, to practice music in order to cheer him up during his lunch and dinners. Also, he wants one of his daughters, Adagia and Allegra, to marry the neighbor's son, Tenori, a Russian young man who early moved to Italy, where he took singing lessons. Because of the distance from his native land, he has almost completely forgot Russian, and he is basically more Italian than Russian, as we can understand by his name, Tenori. The plot takes place precisely around the competition between Tenori and Ruslan, a neighbor who came to help the choir and who is in love with Allegra, the youngest daughter of melodist. Eventually, Tenori marries Adagia and Ruslan marries Allegra. The characters and their new shape are the most innovative element on which depends the different unfolding of the storyline. The first important shift is represented by the names of the characters, which refer to musical vocabulary, with the exception of Ruslan, who is the only one who, at least initially, is out of the musical environment. The Baron, who fell in such a melomania, as one of his valets says, renounces his honorable name and renames himself melodist. He does the same with his daughters and his beloved valets. So he renames Agafia, the oldest one, Adagia, and Agrafena, the youngest one, Allegra. The new names are phonetically similar to the birth names. Furthermore, they stem from two terms belonging to musical terminology, used to indicate the musical pace, such as adagio, allegro, poco mosso, etc. Probably in addition to the intention to create a connection with music, through these names, the author also wants to outline the characters of the young girls. Adagia is more kind, quiet, approachable, and delicate, and the other one, Allegra, is more cheerful, whimsical, and exuberant. In fact, the opposition between the girls' different personalities is highlighted by Tenori, who has to choose which one to marry. In his first aria, at the beginning of the second scene of the third act, Tenori evokes the characteristics of the two girls which amaze him the most. One's melancholy, benevolence, and beauty, and others' wit, vitality, and youth. The name's change also relies to Primo, first, and Secondo, second, whose birth names were Pronka and Savoska. Even in this case, the assonance between the old and new names is evident, besides the fact that they too stem from musical language. The terms first and second are in fact used to identify a group of voices or instruments within the choir and the orchestra, such as soprani first or violini second. Probably the choice of these names is also the purpose of establishing a hierarchy between primo and secondo, who were responsible for the choir of gardeners. Before the stipulation of the marriage contract, even Ruslan, who eventually manages to gain the esteem and the approval of melodists, asks him to change his name in rondeau, another musical term which indicates a musical form definitely fixated in the 18th century. As we noticed, the names of 7 characters out of 7 belong to musical terminology. On the other hand, in the Western models, the only character who has a name with musical origin is double croche, which stands for 16th note, the valet of Barons of Steinbach in La Musicomanie. Pesnoljubie is structured upon a symmetrical and specular schematization. Some characters of the French plays are here redoubled so that the nobleman's daughter, Elise in La Melomania, Isabelle in La Musicomanie, becomes true in Pesnoljubie, Adagia and Allegra. On the other hand, the valet, Crispin in La Melomanie and double croche in La Musicomanie, becomes primo and secondo. This kind of structure gives birth to 4 couples that I will define and differentiate in 3 conventional couple and 1 implicit couple. The conventional couples are created intentionally by the author, therefore it is spontaneous to establish comparisons and identify parallels between the 2 members of it. I would say that the first conventional couple is formed by Allegra and Adagia, 2 sisters who are complementary to each other and who share the same social context and the same treatment by their father. Their dramaturgic interaction is very clear when melodist encourages them to repeat in front of him the aria that they have to sing without any shame and mistakes in the presence of tenori, their betrothed expected for lunch. They sing their aria in turns on the orders of their father, then provoke each other in a back and forth, ending with a short duet in which they are both burning with love for their lovers, not knowing the outcome of the choice. The play opens with the duet of primo and secondo, complaining about the harshness of the melodist who forces them to sing. They are the second conventional couple, a real comic duo, also connected by a brace in the characters list on the libretto, who act like they were a single dramaturgic character. Lastly, Tenori and Ruslan, who share the same fate to become husbands of melodist daughters. This pair pattern ensures that all characters are well-rounded and 3-dimensional, as to be analyzed from multiple points of view, both inside and outside a couple, and both as complementary and opposite characters. Therefore, they maintain their dramaturgical autonomy and continue to act also as individuals, distinguished by their own identity. Eventually, it would be the single character to reach his happy ending, each one for itself, without any external character or event that provides for the resolution of the action. To be more specific, the strategical plan whereby the Italian musician manages to marry the young girl in the French plays, it is also present in Pesnoljubie. But here it is put into practice by Ruslan, who autonomously accomplishes his own willing, snatching the portrait of Allegra from the hands of Tenori, who is looking at the girl's portrait to choose his wife. This gesture allows everyone to get what they want. Eventually, Melodiste, proud of the fact that his neighbor Ruslan began to imitate him, singing and leading a choir, fulfills his desire to marry his daughters with two worthy singers. And Tenori and Ruslan marry the women they love. In terms of comedy, the funniest couple is without any doubt that of Primo and Secondo. Actually, as often happens in prose comedies, the servants are the characters who mostly operate in couple. They advise each other, cheer each other up, and quarrel all the time. Their relationship is based on the opposition between the foolish servant and the crafty servant. The first who complains about what cannot be changed, and the second who strives to find a solution. One who stubbornly fights for matters of principle, and the other who tries to find compromises. Their spots animate the story at more or less regular intervals and help to accelerate the pace of the action. Overall, the play is therefore balanced in its internal dynamics. It is rich, full, and effective. These features make Pesnoljubie so appreciable that it was chosen to open the spring season 1790 of the Court Theatre of St. Petersburg. Melodiste is the only center on which all couples depend. Each character has a partner who is at the same time his equal and his opposite. And Melodiste, as choir master, directly and indirectly guides every action they make. Despite his major role, I also identify a double of Melodiste, the choir, with whom he forms what I called the implicit couple. The choir could be defined like an echo that vibrates in the story even when the Baron is absent. It comments the action of the other characters and expresses consent and appreciation at the end of a song, just like Melodiste would do. Last but not least, the personality of Melodiste and his daughters is also subject to the process of Russification. The Baron, not unlike the protagonists of the French models, has developed a very strong obsession for music. He does not conceive anything in his life that does not have music as its ultimate goal. So much that at a certain point in the story, he invites everyone to quickly arrange the orchestra and the choir for a little concert, because it's only then that the lodge can finally begin. Music is his first thought in the morning, even before his daughters and the concerns related to the estate and to the lands. What differentiates him from the Baron of Steinbach and Geronte is that he truly loves music. He's charmed by her, he's enchanted by it. His obsession was born in his heart and not in his head. It is not a superficial and cosmetic mania. The grotesque trait remains in his personality, but deep down, he is really in love with music he talks about all the time. His feeling is therefore made of a different nature. It is based on love. For the same reason, Isabelle and Lise, despite being two singers or trying to be, are not interested in music and leave it as an obligation of the father's authority. On the other side, Adagia and Allegra are not only deeply fascinated by music, but they also want to improve their performance, constantly asking their father for advice. At the end of the play, Melodiste entertains with his daughters a deep conversation about music, which rises above the classic tones of comedy to become a reflection on the world and on the eschatological sense of life. The goddess harmony reigns over the whole world, which moves following the musical rhythm, and in which everything demands a musical key to access in. Happiness is written in the destiny of those who play and sing smoothly, while unhappy people are unable to grasp the right key and follow the beat. In other words, if the driving force of Dante's universe is love, for Melodiste is undoubtedly music. This last side reveals the sensitivity, the ease, and the spontaneity of a passion which is deeply rooted in Russian people's soul during the period in which national theater was being created. In conclusion, a particular feature which is worth highlighting is the large use of the musical terminology in Pesnoljubie, which witnesses the richness of the musical universe of a nation that is just taking its first step towards the autonomy of its musical theater. One of the aspects that impresses in this comic opera is the abundance of musical terms not only evoked by the names of the characters, but also by the enumeration of instruments, types of voices, and expressions referring to music theory. Here I suggest a few examples. Melodisti, garmanisti, bassisti, altisti, soprani, novabrani came here. Again, the melodist affirms wanting to write an aria for his daughter, Allegra, who wants to practice singing with the accompaniment of the harp. He says, I will write for you an area where I will blend spezzato, volate, e agilità. Or when melodist comments that slacker secondo to go through some musical passages before tenori arrives. Stand up, stupid, feel that hollow gourd and stare straight into your head, tempo ordinario, tempo a cappella, tripola minore and tripola maggiore. Lastly, when primo and secondo enumerate all the groups that have been reunited so that the concert can start. Everyone is there, scripacei, trubacei, valtarnistov, klarnetistov, fagatistov, и харistov. The concert can begin. Thanks to the introduction of a lot of typical Russian realia and a varied and abundant musical lexicon, which we find less present in the French models, we understand how original and autonomous Russian theater was when the process of emancipation from European tradition was just starting. Paradoxically, the French plays, although born in a context of total autonomy, are therefore inspired by each other more than Pesnoljubie is inspired by them. Despite the Russian comic opera cannot yet count on a consolidated national theatrical and musical tradition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I open the floor to questions? I can't see anybody putting their hand up.
Attimo. Si può darsi io, sì. Giada, un attimo. Vedo niente, un attimo solo.
Anna, was that a hand up for a question?
Posso dire in italiano?
Sì,
Ecco, mi piace molto il suo intervento e il tema molto promettente, secondo me, interessante. Ecco, e volevo dire, sapete per caso i lavori del musicologo e sociologo di Mosca, che lavora nel nostro istituto, è Eugenio Dukov?
No, non conosco.
Sarebbe interessante anche a leggerle, a parer mio, perché alcune cose mi sembra lui ha già scoperto, spiegato in modo suo e può darsi corrispondere con queste scoperte, queste ricerche musicali sarebbe interessante. Insomma, mi auguro tante cose belle perché è veramente molto interessante. Io, per esempio, non sapevo tante cose che lei ha raccontato, perché non occupavo di quel problema, solo che ho notato che quando dicono del concerto, dell'orchestra, e quella ultima citazione, lei pensa di quale anno questo dovrebbe essere? Dove sono trubaci, fagottisti, flutisti, clarinetisti e altri artisti. Lei pensa quanto è scritto?
È stato scritto, l'opera è della fine del 1700, quindi gli ultimi anni, è molto, colpisce molto il fatto che ci siano così tanti termini musicali a quell'epoca, che siano conosciuti così tanti termini musicali a quell'epoca, inseriti poi sarà una cosa che verrà inserita, cioè che verrà utilizzata anche dopo, l'enumerazione di termini musicali,
Sì, anche interessante, ma è proprio questa nominazione dei diversi professionisti degli strumenti musicali, a che anno più preciso appartiene secondo lei? Sa perché chiedo? Perché se dentro ci sono clarinetisti, questo dovrebbe essere un po' avanti.
Sì, in effetti. Sì.
Solo questo, grazie.
Grazie mille.
May I ask a question? I think we are in the 80s, here in the late 80s. Ok. Allora, proseguo la discussione in italiano. Am I allowed to continue in Italian or just maybe in English? Maybe in English, which would be more open to all people. I think this is just for the sake of irony. This list of instrumentalists, the terminology was known, completely known since some decades at this stage. And this the quantity of enumerated instrumentalists is just for the sake of irony.
Mm-hmm. This is a comic opera, so the tones is a tone of a
comic opera in at this stage is not necessarily comic, yes, actually, because opera comicisca doesn't mean that there is comic.
Yes.
Comedy in the sense that because this comes from the French term comédien, which means actor. Actually refers only to the fact that there were spoken dialogues in it associated with music numbers. But this opera specifically is comic, actually.
Yes.
That also the terminology and the decision.
The enumeration, exaggerated enumeration. Yes.
Yeah. But also the decision to name characters with music is for the sake of irony towards the use of noblemen who imitated the court practice and had personal feudal orchestra and in their personal courts.
Yes.
I can't see actually in this sort of typically Russian element. My question is actually the following. When you say that this libretto expresses some typically Russian elements, what are you referring to exactly?
I'm referring about the setting, that the usadba is something that exists only in Russia. And as I said, is thanks to this particular setting that this comic opera, the author can convey the irony of this nobleman, this country nobleman that makes up a choir of gardeners. And so this particular setting of the usadba is a typical Russian element that from which the other particular this typical Russian nuance can show up.
Yes, I agree with this because I agree with the fact that moving the action to a Russian context, a typically Russian setting, is a sort of experiment in Russification. But I feel it very dangerous from the point of view of the critics, from your point of view, to use these categories to judge to analyze the libretto, because I mean the category of typically Russian. I think it's something that we have to overcome when we refer to the 18th century repertoire, because also having Italian operas at court was typically Russian of 18th century St. Petersburg. Was typical of the so this society notably in the two capital cities, but notably in St. Petersburg, was cosmopolitan actually. So this was I agree with enhancing elements that makes it clear that the author is trying to Russify a libretto subject. But I would appreciate a further distance from your specific point of view.
Okay. Yes.
This is okay. My obsession, personal obsession, and but I appreciated your work. I'm also reading your thesis. So Julian already knows that, and I would like to ask you, what are you going to do with the music?
Now I'm I'm going to write my master degree thesis on the castrati in Russia, and
no, I mean about the music of this play, because I expect it to be Russified in the sense of choosing Russian popular songs for this music, because Krapavitsky wrote this music while Catherine II, when he was writing verses for Catherine II, Gore Bagatir. So they probably worked together, and they worked probably in the same way. So this so
maybe I will continue on that. I don't understand. The connection is a little bit on delay, so I don't understand the question.
I mean that Krapavitsky was working on this opera while he was working on the verses, on the lines he wrote for Catherine II, Gore Bagatirka Samietovich, another comic opera which has formal elements, common elements.
Okay.
And since the music was expected to bear the responsibility to Russify these plays, I am wondering how this was managed in the music of this specific plays.
The music of this play is really difficult to reach, but it could be interesting to read the partitura, the music, and to understand how this partitura matches with the text, with the libretto.
Because the score was written according to the intentions of the librettists.
Yes.
So it's at the National Library in St. Petersburg.
Yes, it would be interesting, the next step, to analyze the score, comparing it to the text, and I think that a lot of new elements can show up through the analysis of the score of this opera. It is the next step to do, maybe.
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you.
Do we have other comments or questions? Есть ли еще комментарии или вопросы? Can't see anybody's hands going on.
Okay, one question. May I allowed? Are you aware? Are there any information about who actually performed this opera?
No. On my research, there was no name of anyone who performed this opera. There's no trace. So we don't know. There are very poor information about this opera, very, very poor. So it's difficult to know new elements about it.
Was it performed? It was performed by the Russian troupe.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Last chance for further observations or questions? No? Well then, I congratulate all three speakers of this morning's session again. Thank you very much for your very warm contributions. Congratulations. So I think to keep to time,